We looked at styles and really to manually manipulate each point and point label style on thousands of points, really, it's going to be cumbersome to say the least. So what if you could automate the process? CivilCert provides multiple ways to do so. The simplest level of automating point styles is to go through point groups. Let's go ahead and open up our exercise file, and that would be our 0302 point groups. And we see here our 2 points that we added in our last exercise. And so what we're going to do is just take a look briefly at these points. I'm going to select one of them, and we're going to choose properties. So notice again that the properties for the style and point label style are set to default. What does default mean? Well, if we go to the home and open up our tool space, we'll see in our prospector that there is a section called point groups. And by default, similar to layer 0, anytime there's a point in the drawing, there will be an all points point group created. If I right click on the all points point group and go to its properties, notice that it has default styles. So any point in the drawing that has its point style and label style set to default and belongs in the all points point group, then will contain or have these styles associated. Notice if I change the style for the point label to just elevation, click OK, these both change automatically. What are point groups? Point groups really are a way of tagging a point. A point can belong to multiple point groups, and these groups can be used to stylize the point and the label. The point groups can be used for point selection and even used for surface creation. Think of point groups more like hashtags than layers. A layer is an object must belong to a layer, but it can only belong to one. Whereas a point must belong to a point group, but it can belong to many point groups. Let's create another point group. I'm going to right-click here in my prospector on point groups and choose New. And now we're going to name this group Fire Hydrant. We're going to set the point style to making the points look like a hydrant. And then we'll set our label style to elevation, just description. Now, which points to include in the point group? Well, we can use different methods to include points in the point group. We can just select the points manually, but a much more effective method is to automatically add any points that have the raw descriptions matching, and then you can type in any selection of raw descriptions. You can have multiple raw descriptions. You can even add wildcards to the descriptions, and it will include all of those points that are associated to those different raw descriptions. So when I click OK, notice that now my 2 points change to looking like the fire hydrant point style. These points belong to both point groups. If I select all points, and you notice this little dot, that little dot represents there's a collection, and you see the collection below. So in Prospector, when I select this object that has a little dot, I can see the collection of all the objects within that specific point group, and point 1 and 2 are there. They're also in the fire hydrant. So they belong to both point groups. Which point group controls how it looks? When I select this point, notice as I scroll down in its properties, there's such a thing as what's called a primary point group. And for it, it's fire hydrant. So the first point group that it finds itself in, that's the point group that's primary, and that's the style that will be associated. How do we change primary point groups? Again, right-click on point groups here in Prospector. We'll choose Properties. We're going to take our all points, push it up. And so what will happen is it works through this list of point groups. It will find the points in the all points point group first and apply the styles associated to that point group. So point groups, we're using them in this exercise to stylize the point and label, but they can also be used for point selection and surface creation. So remember a few controls here. Primary point group, the point that will be associated visually must have their style and point label style set to default. Think of default similar to by layer. When you create a line, if its color is set to by layer, then it will pick up whatever the layer's color is. Or you can override it. So there's a few different settings there with style. Default means it's going to pick up whatever the primary point group style. So we see a way to manage points using point groups.